Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really profound psychological shift. What is it actually like to live under the belief of permanent divine observation? Based on a deep phenomenological dive by authors Max and Claude, we're going to explore how the entire architecture of your inner life changes when you believe you are constantly being watched.
So let's dive right in with a pretty mind-bending question. How does your self-identity totally restructure when the watcher isn't, just a security camera blinking red above a door or some stranger on a train, but an all-seeing ground of being? What specific textures does that belief press into your daily experience?
Part 1. The structure of being seen.
Before we even get to a divine gaze, we really have to scale up from a baseline we can all relate to. What it feels like just to be watched by another human being. Because existing in a room alone is fundamentally different from existing in a room with someone else. To understand this, we're using a method called phenomenology. Basically, that means we aren't arguing theology or whether God is objectively real. We're strictly looking at the undeniable psychological data of what it actually feels like to believe you are watched. It's about taking subjective experience seriously as primary philosophical data. And this brilliantly illustrates Jean-Paul Sartre's famous park bench experiment. Picture it. When you're alone on that bench, you are the absolute center of the world. Everything radiates out from your perspective. But the second a stranger looks at you, boom, you experience this sudden vertigo. You instantly become an object in their world. The ground just shifts beneath you because you realize you are visible. Which leads us to section 2, eliminating the backstage. Now take that jarring feeling of being seen and scale it all the way up to an observer who is totally omniscient. Under an infinite gaze, every single one of your unformed passing thoughts is instantly registered. In our ordinary lives, we all have this sort of ante-room of consciousness, right? A safe little space where an impulse of anger or a passing doubt flickers before we filter it or claim it. But with an omniscient observer, there is no ante-room. Every flash of feeling is instantly on the record, without you having any time to manage it. This total lack of a backstage basically forces the human psyche into 3 simultaneous braiding registers: comfort, terror, and performance. And what's wild about this is that all 3 can braid together in the exact same person, shifting and evolving across their lifetime. Let's break those down in section 3. Comfort, terror, and performance.
Take the profound comfort of the gaze, for example. A 73-year-old widow named Miriam notes, "He is here. He has always been here. I am not lonely." For her, this presence completely fills the existential aperture. That isolating gap between our individual skull and the vast universe. The divine gaze provides her with the absolute comfort of perfect, uninterrupted attunement. She is perfectly witnessed. But right on the flip side of that, we have a man named David. He experiences the exact same omniscience, but as pure terror. He says, "There was never a moment when I was not being evaluated." He's suffering from this exhausting existential surveillance fatigue. For David, even intrusive passing thoughts have to be instantly managed because the watcher is always recording.
So, how do people handle all these intrusive thoughts? Well, it depends entirely on how they frame the observer. If the watcher is seen as a punishing judge, the gaze produces immense anxiety and this constant urge to conceal and manage the inner self. But if the observer is viewed as a loving witness, someone who sees and fully accepts their darkness without condemning them, it produces radical transparency and safety.
Moving on to section 4, cross-cultural nuance.
This whole psychological balancing act isn't just a Western or Christian thing. Different global traditions have engineered some absolutely brilliant frameworks for navigating this infinite observation. For instance, Islam approaches the gaze through muraqabah, resulting in an effect much like a master training an apprentice. It's formative, not just punitive. Hinduism, especially in bhakti traditions, often frames the gaze as intimate love, teaching action without attachment to the outcome. And Judaism treats it through halakha as a total relational covenant, meaning every small daily action is covered by a reciprocal, highly attentive relationship.
Part 5, the witnessed self. So what does having this permanent second person actually do to the architecture of the human conscience over a lifetime? Well, unlike a secular conscience, where a moral failure is felt as a split within the self, betraying your own standards, a witness conscience treats moral failure as a relational breach. You did something wrong in the presence of the observer. This fundamentally shifts your inner monologue into a constant, ongoing dialogue with that permanent second person. Over decades, this ongoing dialogic relationship really evolves. People often start out in a state of reactive witnessness, where they're just constantly managing their interior under the heavy pressure of the gaze. Then, over time, they experience a thinning of the ego and their defensive self-narratives, until eventually they reach what Sufi practitioner Aisha calls transparent witnessness, an incredible state where the gaze simply passes through a completely undefended self. It creates this profound sense of inhabited ordinariness, without any psychological friction. And finally, Section 6, the universal need for witness. Even for those who reach that state of total transparency, there's this fascinating, almost taboo paradox that reveals something deeply universal about all of us. On one hand, we desperately crave to be perfectly witnessed, to be fully known and loved. But on the other hand, we have this agonizing need for true, unregistered solitude, a desire to just be, without our mere existence becoming recorded data. As developmental psychologist Winnicott theorized, true solitude is actually built on having internalized security, which is first developed in the presence of a reliable observer. Basically, we need the watcher, but we also desperately need the quiet of being unseen. Which leaves us pondering a pretty massive question. If the psychological need for a perfect witness is just a universal feature of the human operating system, who is watching you? Whether you seek it out through religion, deep therapy, or profound human intimacy, aren't we all just searching for a perfect witness to hold our existence? It's a staggering thought to leave you with today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the grammar of your own inner life.